"Father, I'm cold and hungry." The weak voice of one of the boys echoed through the icy ruins. Elias, a weary widower, felt his heart ache as he saw fever burning on the pale faces of his two sons, left to fend for themselves in a forgotten village. The biting wind of that medieval night seemed like a lament as he scraped the earth for roots, desperate for a miracle. It was then that his wrinkled fingers touched something hard and unexpected beneath the mud, something that promised to be their salvation or their doom. Elias's wrinkled fingers fumbled with the object, feeling the roughness of ancient stone, but also a strange smoothness on part of its surface. It was neither a root nor a common rock. With renewed effort, driven by the image of his sons' feverish faces, he began to dig more diligently, using his bare hands and a piece of wood he had found. The damp, cold earth slowly gave way, revealing the contours of a massive, almost perfectly square stone slab that seemed to seal something. Elias's heart pounded with a mix of fear and a hope he dared not name. With each handful of earth removed, the slab became more visible, and Elias realized he was beneath what had once been the pedestal of a fountain, now just ruins covered in moss and oblivion. The notion of a secret hidden there was almost palpable. With a groan of effort, he pushed the slab, which yielded with a drawn-out creak, revealing a dark, damp opening. A smell of ancient earth and stale air rose, but there was no stench of decay he expected from a tomb. The faint moonlight filtered through the clouds, barely pierced the crevice. Elias hesitated for an instant, his mind torn between the unknown danger and the urgency of his children. "Father, I'm cold and hungry." The boy's voice echoed again in his memory, and his hesitation dissolved. He needed a spark of hope, and perhaps it lay there. Carefully, he descended into the underground chamber, feeling the packed earth floor beneath his feet. The darkness was almost total, but his eyes, accustomed to the gloom of the night, began to distinguish shapes. There were stone shelves carved into the wall, and on them ceramic vessels and rolled scrolls. With trembling hands, Elias fumbled with one of the scrolls. The texture was fine, ancient, yet surprisingly preserved. As he unrolled it with the utmost delicacy, he could see intricate drawings and unknown symbols, which appeared to be maps. Maps of what? He didn't know, but the feeling of a monumental discovery overwhelmed him. His gaze then fell upon a small, carefully sealed clay pot. As he opened it, an earthy and gentle aroma filled the air. Inside, there were tiny seeds of a vibrant light green hue. Even in the dim light, Elias picked up a few, feeling life pulsating within them. He was no healer, but his life off the land had taught him to recognize the promise of healing in certain plants. These seeds seemed different. There was an energy in them that spoke directly to his despair. A tear rolled down his wrinkled face. It wasn't from sadness, but from a relief so profound it almost brought him to his knees. He knelt there, on the cold floor of the secret chamber, holding the seeds and the maps. That place, which had seemed a tomb for hope, had revealed a treasure. It wasn't gold, but something far more precious, the possibility of life for his boys. The promise that he would not yield, that he would fight until his last breath, now had a path, a real chance. Elias felt a warmth spread through his chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. He needed to go back to his children, now. The night was still long, but the sun, he knew, was about to rise in his heart. Elias, his heart still pounding in his chest, rose from the cold chamber floor. His fingers, though wrinkled and calloused, held the scrolls and the pot of seeds with an almost reverent delicacy. This was his treasure, his last hope. With a final glance at the darkness that held so many secrets, he climbed back to the surface, pushing the stone slab back into place, not to hide, but to protect what he had found. The night air, once biting, now seemed less hostile, laden with a silent promise. He rushed back to the small crevice in the ruins where he had left his children, the image of their feverish faces etched in his mind. Every step was a prayer, every breath a plea. Upon arriving, he found the boys huddled, trembling under the ragged blanket that barely protected them from the cold. Their moans were weaker, and the skin of one of them, the youngest, was even paler, his lips parched. A wave of panic hit him, but he repelled it with the strength of his newfound hope. With hurried hands, Elias lit a small fire with the twigs he had gathered, the flame dancing and casting trembling shadows on the ruined walls. He picked up the pot of seeds. How to use them? His instinct, forged by years of living off the land, whispered to him. He crushed some of the seeds between two smooth stones, releasing a gentle, earthy aroma that seemed familiar, like the smell of life itself. He mixed the green powder with a little of the water remaining in his canteen, forming a thin paste. With extreme care, Elias approached his eldest son, who was coughing convulsively. "My son, please, drink this," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. The boy opened his eyes with difficulty, a glimmer of confusion and pain. Elias helped him sit up a little, supporting his head on his arm, and offered the paste. The boy swallowed reluctantly, the bitter taste mixed with thirst. Then it was the turn of the youngest, who was even more lethargic, but managed to swallow a smaller portion. The wait began. Elias sat between them, holding their small, feverish hands. Every minute seemed an eternity. He watched every breath, every tremor, every movement. Fear was still there, a tight knot in his stomach, but hope, once a faint spark, now burned with greater intensity, fueled by the courage of his discovery. He stroked the boy's sweaty hair, tears silently streaming down his time-worn face. Hours dragged on. The fire dwindled, and the sky began to lighten on the horizon, painting the east with shades of grey and pink. Elias, exhausted, had almost fallen asleep when he felt a slight movement. The youngest son, who seemed the weakest, opened his eyes and looked at him, not with the confusion from before, but with a faint glimmer of recognition. His skin was still warm, but the cold sweat that had covered him before had subsided. The eldest, in turn, stopped coughing and was breathing more regularly. Elias felt a shiver run through his body, a mix of relief and gratitude that made him sob. The seeds, they were working. It wasn't a miraculous and instant cure, but it was a sign, a small miracle in the midst of desolation. He hugged the boys tightly, kissing their foreheads. "You'll be all right, my sons. We'll be all right," he promised, his voice hoarse. The promise he had made to himself, not to yield, now gained new meaning, a new foundation. The ruined village, once a refuge of despair, now seemed the cradle of a new beginning. The ruined village, once a refuge of despair, now seemed the cradle of a new beginning. The sun, which before had brought only the promise of a longer day of suffering, now bathed the ancient stones with a light of hope. Elias watched his children, their faces still pale, but the sparkle in their eyes, once clouded by fever, began to rekindle. The youngest, with a soft sigh, turned in the blanket, seeking his father's warmth. Elias felt a lump in his throat, a gratitude so overwhelming it almost choked him. With the care of one who handles the most fragile porcelain, Elias prepared another portion of the seed paste. He knew the cure would not be instant, but each swallow was a step, each softer breath was a victory. The boys, though reluctant with the bitter taste, swallowed the mixture, trusting their father's steady hand. In the days that followed, the improvement was slow but constant. The fever subsided, the cough became less frequent, and their weak voices began to gain a little more strength. They were still thin and weak, but the imminent threat of illness receded, giving way to the promise of recovery. While his sons slept, exhausted by the battle against illness, Elias sat by the flickering light of the campfire, the scrolls unfolded on his lap. His wrinkled fingers traced the lines and symbols, trying to decipher the secrets those ancient leaves held. The language was archaic, but the drawings were clear. Mountains, rivers, and repeatedly a symbol he recognized as the representation of a mine. And not just any mine, but a silver mine, forgotten by time and greed. Elias's heart quickened. Silver was not just wealth, it was a means to rebuild, to provide. The discovery of the seeds had saved his children, but the maps promised a future. He looked around at the silent ruins of the village. Fallen stones, crumbling walls, an echo of past lives that seemed to have faded into oblivion. But now, Elias saw something more. He saw the promise of shelter, work, community. That place which he had thought to be the end of his journey could be the beginning of something grand. The task seemed monumental. He was an old man with two small, sick children in an abandoned village. How could he, alone, reopen a mine, rebuild houses, plant the healing seeds? The weight of responsibility overwhelmed him for an instant, but then he remembered the eyes of his children, the renewed sparkle that was beginning to emerge in them. He remembered the promise he had made, not to yield. Elias stood up, the scrolls firmly clutched in his hands. The village would not only be a home for his children, but a refuge for others, for all the displaced who, like him, had lost everything. That forgotten place would become a beacon of hope, a center of healing and prosperity. It was an audacious, almost insane dream, but the flame of hope in his chest, fueled by his unwavering love for his boys and the unexpected discovery, burned with an intensity he hadn't felt in years. The path would be long and arduous, but Elias was ready for every step. Elias, with the scrolls clutched in his calloused hands, felt the weight of the audacious dream. The sun revealed the desolation, cold stones, moss, the silence of a forgotten place. His children, though improving, still needed care. The mine, the seeds, the revitalized village. It all seemed like a sandcastle. A deep sigh escaped him. He knelt beside the boys, who slept more peacefully, their faces less feverish, without the persistent cough. They were his fuel. Tenderly, he smoothed the hair of one of them. "I will not yield," he whispered, the promise etched into his soul. The first days were dedicated to recovery. Elias prepared the seed paste with devotion, watching every drop swallowed, every breath deepen. He scoured the ruins for firewood, clean water, comfort. With each dawn, hope was renewed as he saw the fragile smile on his children's lips, the sparkle returning to their eyes. Weak, yes, but life pulsed with renewed vigor. While the boys recovered, Elias studied the maps. The lines and symbols revealed secrets. The silver mine was not far, but access was challenging, between rocky peaks and treacherous paths. He spent hours tracing imaginary routes, planning each step. The loneliness was immense, and reopening a mine alone, as an old man, seemed like madness. Discouragement tried to creep in, but Elias pushed it away with the image of his children's faces. His first practical task was to secure a safer shelter. The ruins offered walls, but the roofs had collapsed. With iron determination, Elias began to gather loose stones, trying to rebuild a small section of wall where the wind could not enter. His back ached, muscles protested, but he continued stone by stone, with the patience of one who knows that great deeds are built on small gestures. One afternoon, while trying to lift a heavy stone, his children, already with more energy, came to him. The eldest, with curious eyes, pointed to the map. "Father, what is this?" he asked, his voice still hoarse, but with vitality. Elias smiled, tired but full of love. It's our future, my son, where we will find what we need for a new home for us and for many others. He explained in simple words about the silver mine and the healing seeds, how that village could become a place of hope. The boys' eyes widened. They didn't understand the magnitude, but they felt their father's passion. The youngest, with an innocent gesture, picked up a small stone and placed it next to one Elias had just fitted. It was a sign he was not alone. His children, even weak, were already part of that rebirth. The village, once a tomb of memories, began to vibrate with the promise of a new life, driven by a father's unwavering strength and the love that united his small family. The small stone, placed with a child's innocence, was more than a gesture. It was the first seed of a community that would rise from the ashes. Elias smiled, a tired smile that nevertheless radiated long-forgotten hope. His children, once mere shadows of life, were now active participants, small builders of a future he barely dared to dream of. That day marked a silent turning point. The fever disappeared, and the persistent cough became just a memory. Each morning, they woke with more appetite, their brown eyes regaining the sparkle of childish curiosity, and their small bodies showed signs of renewed strength. Elias watched them with a love that overflowed, grateful for every small victory, every smile. The seed paste, once a desperate remedy, was now a ritual of healing, a daily reminder of the gift they had received. With his children's health restored, Elias could devote himself more diligently to the monumental task ahead. The maps of the silver mine were his silent guide, and the healing seeds his promise. But how to begin? He was just an old man with calloused hands, not an engineer or a leader. The loneliness of the village, once a resigned companion, now seemed a heavy burden. He sat by the campfire, the scrolls open, his mind buzzing with ambitious plans and doubts that assailed him. The mine was the key to prosperity, but its location, between steep peaks and deep valleys, promised a dangerous journey and exhausting work, almost impossible for a man alone. One day, while trying to secure a heavy wooden beam, Elias felt a sharp pang in his back, a painful warning from his aging body. A groan of pain escaped, and he had to lean against the cold wall, breathing with difficulty. The years weighed heavily, and the strength he once possessed seemed to have drastically diminished. Discouragement threatened to engulf him like a cold mist, whispering that the task was too great. But then he saw the boys playing nearby, their crystalline laughter echoing joyfully among the ruins. Those laughs were the melody of his soul, the fuel for his unwavering resilience. He could not give up, not for himself, but for them, and not just for them. The vision of other displaced people, of families who, like his own, had lost everything, began to take clear shape in his mind. The village, with its healing seeds and its silver mine, could be a refuge for all, a beacon of hope in a dark world. Elias knew he would need help, strong hands and willing hearts to build. But where to find them, in that desolate and forgotten world? He remembered stories from his youth of how communities united in times of need, of how solidarity was the greatest strength. Hope, though still fragile, rekindled with new intensity. His first priority was the immediate safety and comfort of his children. He worked tirelessly to seal the cracks of the small improvised hut, using moss and mud. The roof, made of intertwined branches and leaves, offered rudimentary protection against wind and rain. At night, while the boys slept soundly, Elias lit the fire and, by its flickering light, continued to study the maps with obsessive dedication. He memorized every winding trail, every river bend, every rock formation. The journey to the mine would be long and dangerous, but he was determined to make it. The boys, now stronger, began to explore the ruins with curiosity, their feet treading lightly on the moss-covered stones. They helped their father with small tasks, carrying twigs or smaller stones, their faces dirty with earth, but radiant with joy. Elias watched them, his heart full of love. That village, once a place of despair and abandonment, was transforming, not just by the seeds or the silver, but by the unbreakable strength of family and the promise of a shared future. He knew the challenges would be immense, but the love for his children and the vision of a refuge for all the helpless propelled him with renewed passion. With every stone he moved, with every plan he drew, Elias felt he was planting the seeds not just of a healing plant, but of a new life, of a hope that would flourish even in the deepest ruins, defying time and oblivion. With every stone he moved, with every plan he drew, Elias felt he was planting the seeds not just of a healing plant, but of a new life, of a hope that would flourish even in the deepest ruins, defying time and oblivion. Days turned into weeks, and the village, though still a skeleton of its former self, was taking on the contours of a home. The small improvised hut, now more robust, sheltered his children with a warmth that winter was beginning to demand. His boys, once pale and weak, ran and laughed among the stones, their faces tanned by the sun and their bodies, though still thin, full of contagious energy. Elias watched them, his heart overflowing with a simple but profound happiness. He spent his mornings tending the small garden bed he had prepared with the healing seeds. The fertile soil, irrigated with water from the nearby stream, responded with vigor. The plants, with dark green leaves and delicate flowers, grew quickly, a silent testament to the life sprouting from desolation. Elias harvested the leaves with reverence, preparing the paste that, though no longer necessary for his children, he carefully stored, feeling that one day others might need it. The vision of the mine, however, remained the greatest challenge. The maps indicated a steep and dangerous trail, and the idea of reopening the tunnels alone, with his back already bent by time, seemed like a chimera. He felt the weight of the years in every bone, in every aching muscle, and the loneliness, at times, was overwhelming. One afternoon, while trying to clear an old path that led to the highest part of the village, Elias felt a sharp pain in his knee. He stumbled, leaning on a mossy stone, his face contorted in a grimace of pain. His children, who were playing not far away, ran to him, their small faces full of concern. "Father, are you all right?" asked the eldest, his brown eyes fixed on his father. Elias forced a smile, trying to hide the pang of despair that pierced him. "I'm fine, my sons. Just a little tired," he replied. But the truth was that physical and mental exhaustion was taking its toll. How could he build a future for them and for so many others if his own body was failing? He sat down, observing the vast valley that stretched below. The mountains, once a refuge, now seemed guardians of an impossible task. A heavy sigh escaped his lips. It was then that, on the distant horizon, a speck of movement caught his attention. Small at first, it slowly grew, revealing itself as a group of figures, perhaps 3 or 4, walking with difficulty along the winding trail that led to the village. Elias's heart leaped. Were they travelers? Other displaced people? Apprehension mingled with a spark of deep hope. He squeezed his children's hands, feeling the warmth of their small palms. As they approached, Elias could distinguish their features. A man and a woman, both in ragged clothes and faces marked by their journey, and 2 small children, one carried in the woman's arms, the other, a little boy, dragging himself beside the man. Their steps were slow, hesitant, and fatigue was evident in every movement. When they finally reached the first ruins of the village, their eyes, once devoid of hope, fixed on Elias and his children. The man with a hoarse voice asked, "Is anyone here? Any refuge?" Elias stood up, the pain in his knee forgotten for an instant. He looked at his children, then at the newcomers, and a warmth spread through his chest. The loneliness was about to be broken. "Yes," he replied, his voice firm, though choked with emotion. "There is refuge here. There is hope." He extended his hand, a gesture of welcome that transcended the barrier of weariness and despair. The woman's eyes filled with tears, and the man, with a nod, began to walk towards them, his children, curious, observing the scene. That was the first step. That was the beginning of the community Elias had dreamed of, proof that even in the most forgotten places, human connection could flourish and build a future. The man, Matthias, with tear-filled eyes, accepted Elias's outstretched hand. His wife, Clara, held their daughter Leah tightly against her chest, while little Tiago hid behind her legs. Distrust and weariness were visible on their faces, but the word hope, spoken by Elias, seemed to have broken an invisible barrier. "My name is Elias," the old man said with a gentle smile, "and these are my sons." Elias's boys, curious, approached, their eyes fixed on the newly arrived children. It was the first time they had seen faces other than their fathers in that place. Clara, her voice choked, managed to murmur, "We are Clara and Matthias, and these are our children Leah and Tiago. We lost everything. We were driven from our lands, like so many others." Her words echoed Elias's own story, creating an immediate bond of understanding and shared pain. Elias nodded, his gaze compassionate. "I understand. Come. You must be exhausted and hungry." He led them to the small improvised hut where the fire still crackled, offering a welcome warmth. Elias's boys, with the innocence of childhood, offered their own pieces of dry bread to the newcomers, a gesture that melted Clara's heart. Matthias, in turn, watched Elias with a mix of gratitude and skepticism. How could an old man in such a desolate place offer refuge? But the sincerity in Elias's eyes was undeniable. As night fell, Elias shared his story, the expulsion, his children's illness, the discovery of the healing seeds, and the maps of the silver mine. He spoke of his dream of transforming the village into a center of healing and prosperity, a home for all the displaced. Matthias and Clara listened attentively, with each word, the seed of hope germinating in their hearts. At first, Matthias, a practical man accustomed to the harshness of life, viewed Elias's vision with caution. Reopening a mine? Rebuilding a village? Alone, Master Elias. That's an impossible task. Elias smiled, a determined glint in his tired eyes. Not alone, Matthias, not anymore. Now we have each other. He extended his hand again, this time not for a handshake, but as a silent invitation to partnership. Clara, with Leah asleep in her arms, felt a wave of emotion. This man, whom she barely knew, offered not just shelter, but a purpose. That night, under a starry sky that seemed to observe the rebirth of hope, the two families shared their meager meal and the warmth of the fire. The children, once shy, began to exchange curious glances, the barriers of distrust slowly dissolving. Elias watched, his heart light. The pain in his knee, once so sharp, seemed to have diminished, replaced by renewed energy. The next day, with the sun rising over the ruins, Elias showed Matthias the maps and the small garden bed of healing plants. Matthias, seeing the lush plants and the details of the maps, felt skepticism give way to admiration. It's incredible, Elias," he murmured, his eyes scanning the lines that indicated the mine. The task was still monumental, but the idea of having a purpose, of building something new, was a balm for his wounded soul. Clara, in turn, dedicated herself to caring for the children, helping Elias's boys prepare the seed paste and organize the small space. Her presence brought a sense of home, of femininity and care that Elias and his children had lost. The laughter of the children, now 4 voices echoing among the stones, was the sweetest of music. Elias felt that the village was no longer just his dream, but the dream of all of them. That was the first brick, not of stone, but of humanity, in the construction of a future that defied desolation and oblivion. The warmth of the fire, the presence of Mateus, Clara, and their children, Leah and Tiago, transformed the cold air of the ruins. Elias felt a profound relief. A burden he had carried alone for so long finally shared. They were not just more mouths to feed, but more hands to help, more hearts to dream. Loneliness, once a constant companion, was now a distant memory, replaced by the murmur of voices and the laughter of children. In the following days, the village, once an echo of desolation, began to vibrate with new energy. Mateus, a man of strong build and experience working the land, proved to be an invaluable ally, while Elias, with his knowledge of the maps and vision for the future, pointed out priorities. Mateus, with his strength and practicality, began to move the heavier stones to secure the most precarious structures. Clara, in turn, brought an order and tenderness that Elias's small home had lacked. She organized the space of the improvised hut, transforming it into a welcoming refuge. With the children, she tended the garden bed of healing plants, her gentle hands harvesting the leaves with the same reverence as Elias. The laughter of Leah and Tiago mingled with that of Elias's boys, creating a symphony of hope that echoed among the stone walls. The first major task was to expand the shelter. Together, the two men worked tirelessly, gathering wood from fallen trees nearby and loose stones from the ruins. Elias, with his wisdom, indicated the best points to secure the beams, while Mateus, with the strength of his arms, lifted and fitted the pieces. The pain in Elias's knee still bothered him, but Mateus's presence by his side made the effort bearable. With each stone moved, a promise was fulfilled. Meanwhile, Clara and the children kept the fire burning, prepared meals, and ensured that water from the stream was always at hand. Cooperation was natural, a rhythm of life that established itself amidst adversity. At night, gathered around the fire, they shared stories, dreams, and fears. Elias spoke of the silver mine, of the hidden treasures that could bring prosperity, and Mateus, once skeptical, now listened with a sparkle of enthusiasm in his eyes. Elias's vision of a village that would be a beacon for other displaced people began to spread to Mateus. He no longer saw only the arduous work, but the possibility of a new beginning, not only for his own family, but for many who, like them, had been forgotten by the world. The idea of justice and altruism, of building a place where no one would be driven out, filled their hearts with renewed determination. One day, as Mateus tried to lift a particularly heavy beam, his face contorted in effort. Elias, noticing the difficulty, placed his wrinkled hand on his friend's shoulder. Slowly, Mateus, together, one step at a time. He took an improvised rope and, with a knot he had learned in his youth, helped lift the beam, showing that experience and ingenuity could compensate for the lack of brute strength. Clara, observing the scene, felt a wave of affection for those men. They were different, but united by a greater purpose. She approached, offering them fresh water, her eyes conveying silent support. The children, sensing the energy of cooperation, began to imitate the adults, carrying small twigs and pebbles, contributing in their own way to the construction of the new home. Each day, the walls rose a little higher, the roof took shape. The improvised hut transformed into a larger, safer refuge. Elias felt that he was not just building a physical shelter, but a foundation of hope and community. The village, once a graveyard of dreams, was being resurrected by love, faith, and the unbreakable will to start anew. The journey to the silver mine was still a distant challenge, but the presence of those new souls, the promise of a shared future, gave Elias the strength to face any obstacle. He knew life would not be easy, but he would no longer be alone. That forgotten place was becoming, stone by stone, heart by heart, the home they all deserved, a living testament that hope, when shared, can move mountains. The synergy between Elias and Matthias was palpable. Each morning brought a new impetus, a new task to be conquered. The shelter, once a simple hut, now extended with higher walls and a more resistant roof, capable of withstanding the inclement weather that was heralded with the changing seasons. Elias, with his experience and knowledge of the village's ancient maps, guided Matthias in choosing the best stones and how to fit them, showing him tricks of ingenuity he had learned in his youth. Matthias, with his strength and dedication, moved and set each one with determination, his muscles tense, but his face illuminated by a purpose. Elias's calloused hands, once solitary, now worked in conjunction with Matthias's, a silent bond of respect and purpose that strengthened with each stone raised. Clara, with her gentle energy, transformed the interior of the new home. She wove mats with fibers found nearby, created improvised partitions with dried hides, and organized the few belongings they possessed, giving each corner a touch of coziness and order. The fire, now more protected and always lit, warmed the environment and served as the center for meals and nightly conversations, its warmth inviting. The children, free from illness and hunger, explored the nearby ruins with insatiable curiosity, their laughter echoing like bells of joy among the ancient stones. Leah and Tiago, once withdrawn and fearful, now played side by side with Elias's sons, inventing games with stones and branches, their voices blending into a melody of rediscovered childhood, a sound that soothed the soul. Elias watched them, his heart flooded with gratitude. That sound was living proof that life, indeed, was being reborn there. During one of those nights, while the children slept peacefully, nestled under the mats, Elias and Matthias sat by the flickering light of the campfire, the maps of the silver mines spread between them. Clara, sitting a little apart, mended a piece of clothing with an improvised needle and thread, but her ears were attentive to every word. "The mine is our next big step, Matthias," Elias began, his voice low and thoughtful, with the tone of one who contemplates a great challenge. "But the journey is arduous, and the work there even more demanding for our bodies." Matthias nodded, his eyes fixed on the contours of the mountains drawn on the scroll, mentally tracing the path. "I know, Elias, but I also know that we cannot stand still. The healing seeds are a blessing that saved us, but the silver can give us the means to build something lasting, to sustain and help others who will come as you dream." He paused, looking at Elias with a serious expression. "I'm ready to go when you are, but what about the children and Clara?" Clara raised her head, her gaze firm and determined, meeting Matthias's and then Elias's. "I can take care of the children here, Matthias, and the plant bed. Elias taught me how to prepare the paste and identify the leaves. This village needs someone to look after it and keep it safe while you are away." Her voice, though soft, carried an unwavering determination, a sense of responsibility that made her strong. She knew her contribution was vital as much as theirs in the mine. Elias smiled at her, a smile of deep respect and relief. "You are right, Clara. Your presence here is as important as ours in the mine. The children will be safe and well cared for with you, and the village will have a diligent guardian." He turned to Matthias, a sparkle of hope in his tired eyes. "We need tools, Matthias. The old mines will require pickaxes, shovels, sturdy ropes, and a lot of patience and caution." The conversation stretched into the night, detailing plans and challenges, assessing risks and rewards. The idea of leaving the village, even temporarily, to go to the mine brought a pang of anxiety to everyone, an imminent separation, but the vision of a prosperous and welcoming future for many was stronger, overcoming any fear. Elias felt that with each passing day, with each challenge overcome, the community grew stronger. Its bonds became firmer. This was no longer just his dream, but the dream of all of them, a shared commitment to hope and resilience. The journey would be long and dangerous, but they were no longer alone. The village, once a tomb of memories, was now a cradle of futures, built with the sweat and love of united hearts. Hope, once a flickering flame, now burned with an intensity that illuminated the path ahead, promising that together they could move mountains and rewrite their destinies. With each day, with each small advance in building the shelter, with each child's laughter echoing among the ruins, Elias felt he was planting not just the seeds of a healing plant, but of a new civilization, where compassion and solidarity would be the pillars. He knew the silver mine was the next big step, the challenge that would test the strength of his new family, but the certainty that he would not be alone filled him with renewed courage. That village, once a refuge of despair, was becoming a beacon of hope, a testament to the unbreakable human will to start anew. Hope, once a flickering flame, now burned with an intensity that illuminated the path ahead, promising that together they could move mountains and rewrite their destinies. The following days were filled with feverish preparation. Elias and Matthias scoured the ruins in search of any object that could be transformed into a tool. They found remnants of rusted iron that Matthias, with the help of a more intense fire and heavy stones, managed to shape into rudimentary pickaxes and improvised shovels. Both their hands, already calloused, became even more marked by the effort, but the determination in their eyes was unwavering. Clara, in turn, dedicated herself to preparing provisions. With the few seeds Elias had saved and some edible roots that she and the children found nearby, she baked dry breads and prepared nutritious mixtures that could be taken on the journey. Her eyes, though full of apprehension, shone with the silent strength of one who takes on a vital responsibility. With each piece of bread she wrapped, she felt she was weaving a thread of protection around her men. The morning of their departure arrived, cold and cloudy, a mirror of the anxiety that hung in the air. The children, sensing the change, hugged their parents with unusual intensity. Elias's sons clung to his legs, their small faces worried. Elias knelt, his eyes moist, and hugged them tightly. "I will return, my loves, and I will bring a future for all of us," he whispered, his voice choked. Matthias, in turn, kissed Leah and Tiago's foreheads, promising Clara that he would look after Elias and return safely. Clara, with a lump in her throat, merely nodded, her eyes conveying a mixture of love, fear, and faith. She knew the journey was dangerous, but she also knew it was the only chance for a real future. With improvised backpacks on their backs, containing tools and provisions, Elias and Matthias began the ascent. The trail, which the maps indicated as the most direct path to the mine, was steep and treacherous, covered with loose stones and dense vegetation. The silence of the mountain was broken only by the sound of their footsteps and the wind whistling through the rocks. Elias felt the weight of years in every joint, the pain in his knee intensifying with each step. He breathed with difficulty, but the image of his children and the promise of a prosperous village propelled him. Matthias, younger and stronger, cleared the way, using the pickaxe to remove obstacles, but he also felt the fatigue. He looked at Elias, admiring the elder's resilience, and felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. By midday, the sun broke through the clouds, revealing the vastness of the mountains. The village, now a distant speck below, seemed a tiny point of hope. They made a brief stop to rest, sharing a sip of water and a piece of bread. Elias pointed to a distant peak. "The mine is beyond that gorge. The maps indicate a hidden entrance. almost a scar in the rock. Matthäus nodded, his eyes scanning the imposing landscape. The magnitude of the task was overwhelming. But Elias's vision of a place where no one would be driven out, of a center of healing and prosperity, was a beacon amidst the uncertainty. With each step, with each obstacle overcome, they felt they were building not just a path to silver, but an unbreakable bond of trust and purpose, a testament that unity and hope could truly move mountains. The trail became steeper, the thin air biting at their lungs with every step. Elias, his face creased with effort, leaned on his improvised staff, his eyes fixed on the ground to avoid stumbling. Matthäus, ahead, used the pickaxe to clear a path through the undergrowth and loose stones that easily gave way. The silence of the mountain was oppressive, broken only by the panting sound of their breaths and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. With each passing hour, hope, once a bright beacon, seemed to diminish a little, replaced by an exhaustion that threatened to consume their last strength. Elias felt his knee protest with every movement, a dull ache that spread through his leg, but the image of his children and Matthäus's children smiling in the village was the fuel that propelled him. He thought of Clara, the diligent guardian of the home and the plants, and felt a warmth in his chest. He could not fail. Finally, after hours of strenuous climbing, they reached the gorge. The mine entrance, a dark, irregular crevice in the rock, looked like a sleeping mouth, swallowing the little light that dared to penetrate. Cold, damp air emanated from within, carrying the smell of wet earth and minerals. Matthäus lit an improvised torch, the flame flickering, casting dancing shadows on the rocky walls. "It's here, Elia," he whispered, his voice laden with reverence and a touch of apprehension. Elias nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the threshold between dream and reality, between promise and hard work. They entered the mine, their steps echoing in the void. The darkness was almost total, and Matthäus's torch barely managed to illuminate the way. The tunnel was narrow, the walls damp and irregular, and the ceiling, low in some places, forced them to stoop. With each meter, the feeling of entering a place forgotten by time intensified. After a few minutes of cautious walking, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, but what they saw made their hearts sink. A huge pile of collapsed rocks and earth completely blocked the way forward, forming an insurmountable barrier. It seemed that a part of the mine had given way long ago, burying the passage to what the maps indicated was the main silver vein. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with discouragement. Matthäus let out a deep sigh, the torch trembling slightly in his hand. "It's blocked, Elias, completely. How are we going to get past this?" His eyes, once full of determination, now reflected a shadow of despair. Elias approached the pile of rubble, running his wrinkled hand over the cold stones. He felt frustration and weariness weigh upon him, a wave of discouragement threatening to engulf him. So many sacrifices, so much hope, only to find such a colossal obstacle. But then he remembered the promise he had made to his children, the village that awaited them, the community that depended on that silver. He closed his eyes for an instant, taking a deep breath. "We won't give up, Matthäus," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. "The maps are clear. The silver is beyond this. We need a plan." He raised the torch, examining the side wall of the chamber, looking for a crevice, a weakness, any indication that there was a way to bypass or remove the blockage. Matthäus, seeing the unwavering determination in Elias's eyes, felt a new spark of hope ignite in his own chest. Together, they would face that challenge, as they had faced so many others. The mine would not defeat them. Elias, his forehead furrowed in concentration, ran his wrinkled fingers over the cold, damp rock, as if trying to read the mountain's history. His eyes scanned every crack. every irregularity, remembering the details of the maps he had studied so many times. There was something, a faint, almost imperceptible line that he had noticed on the scroll, indicating an old, long-forgotten ventilation gallery that ran parallel to the main vein. It was a narrow, dangerous passage, but perhaps it wasn't buried. "Matthäus," Elias called, his voice low, but charged with new urgency. "The maps, they show a smaller passage to the right, almost hidden around here." He pointed to a section of the wall that seemed more solid, but where the rock had a slightly different coloration. "It's an old gallery, used for ventilation. If it wasn't completely sealed, it might lead us to the other side of the collapse." Matthäus approached, the torch illuminating the indicated spot. At first he saw only solid rock, but leaning in, he noticed a subtle depression, a kind of indentation that was barely distinguishable from the wall. "It looks like an illusion, Elias. It's so small." "Patience and observation are our best tools now, my son," Elias replied, a tired but confident smile playing on his lips. "The mountain guards its secrets cunningly. We need to be more cunning." He took the improvised pickaxe and carefully began to scrape away the layer of earth and moss that covered the depression. With each light blow, small pieces of rock and earth broke off, revealing an even smaller opening, almost a mouse hole, but one that seemed to deepen into the darkness. Matthäus, seeing Elias's persistence, felt adrenaline course through his veins again. He took his own pickaxe and, with more force, but still with caution not to cause a new collapse, began to widen the crevice. The work was slow and exhausting. With each stone removed, with each handful of earth thrown back, hope grew. Sweat streamed down their faces, mixing with the mine dust, but they did not stop. The image of Clara and the children waiting in the village was a silent mantra in their hearts. After what seemed like hours, the opening was large enough for a man to squeeze through. Matthäus, more agile, was the first to try. He contorted himself, pushing the tools ahead, and disappeared into the darkness. Elias waited, his heart pounding, hearing only the muffled sound of Matthäus's movements. A minute seemed an eternity. Then a muffled cry from Matthäus echoed from within the passage, a cry of pure euphoria. "Elias! You were right! It's here! It's the silver!" Elias, with trembling hands, squeezed through the opening, feeling the pain in his knee but ignoring it. As he emerged into the new chamber, Matthäus's torch revealed a sight that made him gasp. The walls of the gallery shone with a silver gleam, veins of ore glinting under the flickering light. It wasn't a small sample, but a vast expanse, a shimmering promise of a future. Matthäus, his eyes wide with wonder, ran his hand over the rock, feeling the coldness of the metal. "It's more than I ever imagined, Elias, much more." His voice was a whisper of awe and relief. Elias felt a solitary tear roll down his wrinkled face. It wasn't for the silver itself, but for what it represented: the end of hunger, security for his children, the realization of his dream of a village that would be a beacon of hope. That silver gleam was not just metal. It was the materialization of his unwavering faith, the testament that love and perseverance could move mountains. They had found the way. The future, once uncertain, shimmered with the promise of a new beginning, not only for them, but for all who would seek refuge and healing in that forgotten place. The journey home would be long, but the burden of uncertainty had been replaced by the lightness of victory. The journey back from the mine, though still steep and tiring, was now light, laden not only with the first samples of silver, but with a much greater treasure, the certainty of victory. Elias and Matthäus descended the trail with renewed vigor. Their steps, once heavy with uncertainty, now resonated with the melody of hope. The gleam of silver in their hands was a tangible reminder of the future that awaited them, a future they had unearthed with their own hands. Elias felt the pain in his knee, but it was drowned out by the joy that flooded his chest. Mateus, by his side, maintained a wide smile, his eyes fixed on the path, but his mind already on reuniting with his family. When the village appeared in sight, a small speck of light and smoke in the valley, a cry of relief escaped Elias's lips. The children playing near the hut spotted them and ran to meet them, their small arms open. Elias's sons threw themselves into his arms, their faces radiant with happiness. "Father, you're back!" they exclaimed in unison, their voices thin and full of love. Elias hugged them tightly, feeling the warmth of their bodies and the beat of their hearts, a melody worth more than all the gold in the world. Mateus was greeted by Clara, who embraced him with a mix of relief and gratitude, while Leah and Tiago clung to his legs, laughing. That night, by the light of the campfire, the silver glittered, no longer as a distant promise, but as a real gift. With the silver, they were able to forge stronger tools, build more solid houses, and even trade for essential supplies that the village could not produce. News of the mine and the healing plants spread like a gentle whisper through the valleys, and gradually other displaced families, drawn by hope, began to arrive. Elias, with the help of Mateus and Clara, organized the community. Each new resident brought with them a skill, a story, a heart willing to start anew. The village was reborn. The medieval ruins, once gloomy, were transformed into welcoming homes. The old fountain, where Elias had found the maps and seeds, became the center of a lush garden, where medicinal plants grew under Clara's diligent care. She became the village healer, her gentle hands applying the healing pastes, her eyes conveying comfort and hope. The village became a true center of healing and prosperity, a refuge for all who had lost their homes and their hopes. Elias, now a respected patriarch, watched life flourish around him. His children, healthy and full of life, played with the other children, their laughter echoing through the mountains. Mateus and Clara, with their own children, were the pillars of the community, sharing the burden and the joy of building a future. On a sunny afternoon, Elias sat in the village square, which now teemed with life. He saw an elderly woman, her face marked by life, but with a smile on her lips, helping to weave baskets. A young man, once sick and weak, now worked in the mine, his muscles strengthened. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on his wrinkled face. That place, once a tomb of memories, was now a beacon of hope, a living testament that compassion, persistence, and human unity could move mountains and transform desolation into a garden of dreams. He had lost his lands, his wife, and almost his children, but he had found something much greater, an extended family, a purpose, and proof that even in the deepest ruins, hope can flourish and build a future that transcends any adversity. Elias opened his eyes, a serene smile on his lips. He knew his journey had come to an end, but the story of that village, built with love and resilience, was just beginning. Elias opened his eyes, a serene smile on his lips. He knew his journey had come to an end, but the story of that village, built with love and resilience, was just beginning. Years passed, and what were once forgotten ruins transformed into a vibrant community, a testament to hope. The stone walls, once crumbling, now sheltered families who found there not just a roof, but a purpose for their lives. His sons, now strong young men, were guardians of the silver mine with Mateus. They learned to extract and value the metal, a link to prosperity. Their laughter echoed through the tunnels, a sound Elias never thought he would hear. Mateus, wise and experienced, supervised the extraction and trade, ensuring the silver was used for the common good, exchanged for food, fabrics, and tools that enriched everyone's lives. Clara, with skillful hands and a generous heart, was the soul of the healing garden. Her cultivated medicinal plants were the foundation of the village's health. She taught the young people to identify herbs, prepare pastes, and care for the sick, perpetuating Elias's knowledge. Her gentle gaze and comforting words were a balm for ailments, and the village revered her. Leah and Tiago, her children, grew up immersed in this environment of care and compassion. The central square, once empty, was now the pulsating heart of the community. Weekly fairs attracted distant merchants, trading products for silver and healing herbs. Children played, joyful voices filling the air, while adults shared stories and laughter. Elias, on his bench under the revitalized tree, observed everything with a sparkle in his eyes. He saw in every face, in every gesture of help, the realization of his dream. Hunger and disease had been overcome, the silver ensured subsistence, Clara's plants, health. There was an intangible wealth, human connection, the solidarity that united every resident. The village was not just a physical place, it was an ideal, where even after the greatest losses, life could be rebuilt with love and faith. Elias felt time in his bones, but his spirit remained young, nourished by gratitude and love. He recalled the days of despair, the pain of loss, the uncertainty. Every arduous step had been a brick in the construction of a new world. He had proven that true wealth was not in land or gold, but in sowing hope and reaping a community. On a clear night under the starry sky, Elias gathered his children and grandchildren, and Mateus and Clara's family. He told them again the story of the village, from their expulsion from their lands to the discovery of the secret chamber. His words were a living legacy. "Never forget," he said, his voice soft but firm, "that the greatest strength lies in our hearts, in the love that unites us, in courage and compassion. This village proves that even in ruins, hope can flourish and build a future." The young people listened, their eyes fixed on the patriarch. They knew that Elias's story was the foundation of their lives. The village, once a medieval ghost, was now a beacon of light, a promise for the future, where love and resilience would prevail. Elias closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of his children's hands. He had fulfilled his promise.